Welcome back to lovely story time, everyone. We are so happy to see you again in this exciting journey. Today, we will continue to explore part 43 to 48 of the story, After Breaking Apollo's Heart. Grab your snacks, take a seat, and explore this story together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content. Let's get started. Chapter 43, A Flood of Passion. Apollo's grip was fierce when he seized her, but the instant before their lips met, he hesitated. What followed was a kiss like fresh snow, even with her senses dulled by wine. Daphne felt his caution. It began as a simple linger, a feather's graze, soft, fleeting. She thought that was it. If this was Apollo's first kiss, she couldn't expect flair. But he pulled back slightly, as if studying her face to confirm she was the one he wanted. Then he leaned in again, pecking gently, mapping her lips' edges, testing angles, gauging her response. His fingers stayed at her nape, cradling her, limiting how far she could pull away. The divine scent of his touch brushed her skin, each stroke sparking electric shivers. Everything was slow, gentle, leaving room to stop, his force clearly restrained, as if she were fragile and to be handled with care. Yet a hollow hunger grew in her the more he held back. The stronger it burned, stirring defiance. Too much restraint felt like too little commitment, so if the next time their lips brushed, she bit him, a teasing challenge. Apollo froze, tensing. The next moment, her back hit a cold, hard surface, maybe a wall, maybe a pillar, it didn't matter. Her small bite cracked his defences, and they crumbled fast. He surged forward, as if searching for the wine that made her so bold, rummaging through her lips and tongue for Dionysus's lingering droplets. Gods learned quickly. It seemed he soon mastered stealing and returning her breath. Despite Thetis's blessing, Daphne felt a drowning suffocation. Apollo's flooding passion submerged her in the deep sea. Her breaths turned to bubbles, a delicate entwined chain, parting and merging. It felt like anything could happen next. But the extra sip of heady wine was hers, not Apollo's. He pulled back, one hand braced on the wall by her cheek, catching his breath. His voice was lower than usual. I promised to return to Thetis and the others. Her breaths came too fast to speak, so she just watched him. Apollo shut his eyes, struggling to look away, muttering as if to himself, "You're not sober." She found his fumbling excuse oddly charming. With the last unclouded shred of thought, she swayed closer. "I have something to tell you." "Later. Rest first." He stepped back, slipping out and closing the hall's door behind him. Daphne drifted in place. Strength, draining, sinking. The blaze of excitement faded, exhaustion crashing twice as hard. She didn't know where the bedroom was, so she stumbled into a room, spotted a couch, and collapsed. Consciousness plunged into blackout darkness. Nothing surrounded her. The formless darkness, wrapping her tightly, was indescribable, boundless, neither accepting nor rejecting her. Instinct screamed she couldn't linger in this vast void, or she'd become part of it. But she didn't know how she'd arrived. She'd asked Dionysus for potent wine, partly to test Apollo, but mainly to slip into a near soul-wandering stupor, like when she'd contacted Eros before. But somehow she'd landed here. Her first instinct was to call the love god's name. The thought formed, and a chilling dread slithered up her spine. She'd sworn to Styx she'd have no further dealings with Eros. She'd played word games, her oath barred initiating contact. Indeed, Styx's vow hadn't stopped Eros from pulling her into that cloud sea. But now, things were trickier. Not only was Eros absent, she wasn't sure she could return to her body. Her mind raced, then sparked. "Cupid," she said. No ominous chill followed. Emboldened, she pressed. "Cupid of this world, I call you." Nothing, as expected. Then, chaotic colours flooded her vision. Her numbing body regained sensation. Opening her eyes, the familiar cloud sea appeared. She exhaled, belatedly terrified of that void, making even Eros's scheming, pretty face seem oddly comforting. "I didn't expect you to seek me out." "Clever, using that name," Eros said, clapping theatrically. "You mentioned knowing Cupid at our first meeting. She hadn't thought it would work. So, what's urgent enough to find me? Eros looked genuinely clueless. You distracted those pursuers in Thrace. That's left me in a tricky spot. Eros narrowed his eyes, still smiling, but colder. Blaming me for saving you. I just want to know why. You rarely meddle in Olympian disputes, and even if I perished in Thrace, it could have served your goal of breaking his heart. If Eros's aim was merely to punish Apollo's taunt. The youthful love god paused, dropping his playful dodge. You can't die yet. She wanted to press, but knew Eros would reveal no more. His statement was telling enough something compelled even Eros to intervene, likely tied to the greater intent Gaia hinted at. On the god's stage, Daphne still had a key role to play. Thank you for clarifying. I trust your reasons, but I don't know how to explain this to him, she said, choosing words carefully to avoid sounding whiny. He doesn't know yet, but he will. Without a reason from you, or guidance on how to explain, everything I've done might be for nothing. Would it really be for nothing? Eros countered slowly. She froze. If he suspects I deceived him under your orders and I can't clear myself, won't he be furious? Eros pondered, nodding. Definitely. Old. Just hidden. He plucked a golden arrow from his quiver, twirling it, eyeing her. Never wanted to cover for someone important, to find excuses for them. She fell silent for a long time. That's your hint. I trust you'll handle this little issue brilliantly, Eros said, shifting on his cloud, his kind tone laced with dismissal. Anything else? One last question. Is the golden arrow in Daphne's body still effective? Eros flashed a wicked, sly grin. Does it matter? She persisted, unusually stubborn. I want to know. He sighed dramatically. I can make the cold-hearted obsess over someone they'd barely glance at. But if they don't change, that fevered desire fades faster than foam once they get what they want. Likewise, I can make enemies love madly, but if their hatred's root persists, the arrow's effect won't last. In other words, the arrow's duration depends on one thing, the heart of the struck. Daphne opened her eyes. She braced for a hangover's ache and floatiness, but felt refreshed, as if she truly slept well. Sitting up, she scanned the room in her haze. She'd picked what looked like a storage chamber, windowless, without deep-sea pearl lamps. She didn't know how long she'd slept. The sea's light barely shifted, and no glow seeped in, leaving only dimness. She stood to check outside, but froze, catching a pair of faintly glowing eyes in the corner's shadows. She stumbled back, nearly hitting the wall. The figure surged forward. As shock faded, Daphne recognized him. The glow came from the dark gold ring in a god's eyes, and even in the gloom, the deep, almost eerie blue of his irises unmistakably belonged to Apollo. You scared me, she said, sensing something off. The air lacked the sticky mix of awkwardness and intimacy that follows a kiss between lovers. Apollo. He didn't answer, just stared with unnerving focus. His gaze was a paradox lover-like vision narrowed by obsession, seeing only her, blind to all else, yet sharp as a knife, as if pinning her in place to dissect her with his eyes. Under that stare, Daphne fought not to tremble. What happened? Please, not what she feared. A moth flutters to an unseen light, only to be scorched by a god's unaware radiance, a beautiful, sad tale. But far worse is when the god notices the moth, sees its wings' patterns, realizes its flight to him was a mistake, mistaking him for moonlight to guide its path, in other words, mere use. So, the god despises the insect and burns it to ash. How long had Apollo watched her from that corner? What had he seen? What was he thinking? When he truly saw her, would it be her end? Apollo, her voice trembled. He finally blinked. Hermes brought me Artemis's message. Apollo sounded calm enough. When you and Dionysus escaped Thrace's king, Eros's sudden interference gave you the chance to flee. I was stunned when I heard. Hermes said father was surprised too, it wasn't his order. Hera's even more baffled why the love god meddled, ruining her scheme. Protecting the weak isn't like Eros. So, why? His tone carried an odd amusement, as if he genuinely found it a fascinating puzzle to share with her. Worse than the news leaking was Apollo's dangerous calm. The already cramped room grew stifling with each word. Daphne edged back, but his pupils contracted fiercely, his form closing in, trapping her between him and the stone wall. No escape. A familiar pose, but none of the earlier clumsy instinct-driven passion remained. Daphne didn't know what she was thinking. She shut her eyes, bracing for the blade to fall. Instead, Apollo's hand grazed her cheek, tracing an unprecedentedly tender line from her lip to her earlobe. She froze, but no further move came, so she opened her eyes slowly. So slowly. He seemed to wait for that, gently tucking a stray lock behind her ear, lifting her face toward him. The slightest shift in her expression would be caught by the immortal's scrutinizing gaze. Holding this pose teetering on the edge of a kiss, Apollo looked into her eyes and asked, "Why did Eros do it, Daphne?" Maybe you know the answer. Chapter 44, Daphne. Was our meeting truly by chance? I don't know. It was the only answer Daphne could give. The test came too fast, leaving no room to strategize, forcing her to ride the surge of her thoughts. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd suspect me again." "Didn't tell me?" Apollo echoed softly, his lips curling as if amused, though his eyes held no warmth, not deliberately hiding it. Daphne avoided his gaze, her lashes trembling at his second question. He leaned closer, his divine, solemn presence enveloping her, more overwhelming than ever. A god could easily bend a weaker being to his will, and her body shook involuntarily, craving to confess, to submit. But the crushing weight lasted only a moment. Apollo reined in his aura, though it only meant he'd probe her another way. Dionysus happened to never mention it either coincidence, or is that the secret you two share? His grip tightened, not painful, but unsettling, as if his fingers lifting her face could slide to her throat any moment. Was it fun, scheming with him to deceive me? His breath grazed her lips as fine bubbles, like a faint kiss, their bodies still recalling the sensation. He stiffened, his tone almost gritted. Was that another way to distract me? She couldn't let him follow that thread, she had to steer back. Daphne met his icy eyes, defending herself. I don't know why Eros helped. Maybe he saw you care for me a little, making me useful to exploit, or maybe it was a whim. I'm just a nymph. How could I fathom a god's motives? She gave a self-deprecating smile. I can't defend myself, but I haven't broken my oath to Styx. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here. You kept your Styx oath, so what once is chance? Twice a rare fluke, but 3 times. More. Sure, no evidence ties you directly to Eros, but you're tangled in too many events with him, with no clear overlap. His nose brushed her temple, inhaling deeply through her hair, lips grazing her earlobe as he spoke. Like Artemis. I'm a hunter. All hunters know when eyes find no clues. Trust instinct. No beast or being passes without leaving a trace. His movements, intimate yet predatory, didn't stop. Daphne knew it was impossible, but she tensed, fearing he'd detect some damning scent, yet dodging would confirm his doubts. She forced herself still, pressed against the wall. After a long pause, Apollo pulled back, his expression unreadable. Daphne, you're hiding a massive secret. Ozus, Dwelfi, even if I'm not Hermes, not as skilled in deceit. I grasp simple truths, he said, his voice soft, his words chilling. Not lying doesn't equal honesty. Daphne fought to keep her face steady. Clumsy liars spin baseless tales, the clever ones. His fingertip traced her lips, pressing, rubbing, a tender yet resentful touch. Omit key facts, twist sequences, craft plausible nonsense. She inhaled deeply, letting cold seawater flood her nose and throat. Thetis's blessing kept her from choking, but the sting in her airways kept her sharp. She let her hurt and defiance show. If you've already judged me guilty, why ask you won't believe anything I say? Apollo flinched as if struck, releasing her. After a moment, he said softly, On the contrary, I desperately want to believe you. She held her breath. If I wanted, I could use my power, intimidation, coercion, even my authority over justice to force the truth, he said with an odd chuckle. But absurdly, I don't want to. He froze, as if shocked by his own words, but he accepted it, his uncontrollable bias, the defeat his special treatment implied. Daphne, I want you to give me a reason I can believe. The lofty son of Leto faltered, as if swallowing his vast pride. If your goal was to steal my heart, congratulations, you've succeeded. He gazed at her with a fervour beyond her wildest dreams, lowering his head. You're so eloquent, tell me a story that ties it all together. Even if it's far from truth, I'd likely ignore its flaws and believe it. She stayed silent, lips pressed, meeting his gaze. His expression dimmed. Then we faced the ugly truth. I've never asked you directly. Now's the time. His hand on her cheek clenched into a fist. Daphne, was our meeting truly by chance? One low sharp syllable, no? Apollo blinked, pained. Taking half a beat to confirm he'd heard right, Daphne tilted her face, smiling. I didn't expect the python, but I went to Delphi for you. On whose orders? She laughed. Do you really need me to say after a pause? She said evenly. Eros. He told me I'd find you there. The stone under Apollo's hand groaned, bubbles seeping from growing cracks. He couldn't maintain his calm. Firing 3 questions. What did he want you to do? Seduce me? Make me love you? Yes, even if it meant you'd be struck by a golden arrow, loving me against your will. She lowered her eyes, silent. He took it as assent. Why serve him? For what he nearly stumbled over his words, closing his eyes to press on. What did he promise? No, what did he threaten to force your help? His words gripped her chest, a warm, aching pulse racing from toes to scalp. For a moment, she nearly softened. He genuinely wanted to believe her, grasping for any proof she had no choice, however flimsy. But she held firm. I chose to, she said. Apollo stared, rigid, then grabbed her shoulders. What did he give you? She looked away. Her silence, like a vow of loyalty to Eros, enraged him. He forced her face back, voice sharp, trembling fingers causing pain. What did Eros promise? What can he give that I can't? Daphne shut her eyes. This body has 10 years left, at most. Apollo froze, clearly unable to process. My body isn't normal. Unlike other nymphs, I'll die when it reaches its limit. Maybe younger than many mortals, in both appearance and years lived, she said, calm as if speaking of another. Not wielding water's power is just a symptom. This is the truth of my flawed form. He hissed like a snake. Impossible. My mother, Gaia, told me. You can ask her. Apollo seemed at a loss, his grip loosening, then tightening again, sliding gently to her arms, as if fearing she'd vanish if he let go. But you're Ladon and Gaia's daughter, why would... She gave a wry smile, her eyes curving. Gaia didn't say why. I'd love to know why I must die. Does your father know? Daphne shook her head. He doesn't. I don't want him to. Apollo pressed, struggling. Eros promised you immortality, she corrected. A new life. How could he do that? I don't know. Apollo nearly laughed, exasperated. You agreed without knowing how or if he could deliver. Her smile was soft, self-mocking. I had no other choice. His appearance was already a miracle. He inhaled deeply, sidestepping Eros's vague promise. Why not seek other gods? You didn't have to be Eros's. Daphne found it amusing. Imagine a strange nymph begging you for aid, for ambrosia or some boon, would you grant it? Apollo's eyes flickered. She brushed his cheek lightly, pulling back quickly, her tone oddly breezy. To survive, I chose to trick your love. That's the ugly truth's first half. A brief silence. Daphne reached into her collar, pulling out a cord with a clay amulet, handing it to Apollo. And this is the second half. Apollo sensed its weight, frowning. You can break the shell. Just don't touch what's inside. He smashed the amulet on the floor. Clay shattered, water sweeping away debris, revealing a cold silver arrowhead. Eros likely wanted me to use it after you loved me, to erase my feelings for you, fulfilling his revenge, Daphne said, still calm. No turning back now. Her cards were on the table, next was luck, or rather, Apollo's reaction. He stared tightly. Why give this up? You could pierce my heart, nullifying the golden arrow, ending your promise to protect me. Whatever punishment you choose erasing me, I'd accept, she said, biting her lip, as if the next option was crueler, harder to voice. Or, Use it on yourself to erase your feelings for me, to free you. It's your choice how to use the arrow. Apollo gazed, stunned. Then his dimmed eyes blazed anew. His clear blue eyes sparkled with joy, like molten gems, so intense she could melt in their heat. Under that gaze, Daphne struggled to breathe. She sidestepped instinctively, fleeing the warming water around him. He blocked her, trapping her between an empty stone table and himself. He studied her anew, head to toe. Their only contact was his thumb on her cheek, tracing lightly yet with undeniable presence, conjuring an illusion of loving caresses elsewhere, sending shivers up her spine. Apollo leaned closer, nearly touching her forehead. "I'm asking why. Why hand over your escape?" She tugged her lips into a hoarse murmur. "Do I have to answer?" His silent stare made staying calm at such close range nearly impossible, so Daphne pressed his hand on her cheek, nuzzling it playfully. Then, meeting his eyes, she said, "Because I love you." A beat of silence as if the sea's tide stilled. Her feet left the ground, and in a flash she was lifted onto the stone table, no time to gasp. Golden light filled her vision. Apollo's hands pinned her restless fingers, leaning down to kiss her. When she could breathe again, Daphne felt a survivor's relief just to kiss, yet she'd thought more than once he might devour her whole. Mid-pullback, she fell toward him, her hair caught on his shoulder's cloakpin. She hissed in pain, then laughed, meeting his twinkling blue eyes. "I've got it." Apollo freed her hair carefully, not breaking a strand, but he didn't let go, wrapping it around his finger 1.5 times, releasing it reluctantly. "There's another choice," he said, glancing at the lead arrowhead on the floor, abruptly returning to the topic. "Let an Eros go to Tartarus." Her breath caught, her heartbeat thundering. "Daphne, choose me. Stay by my side and I'll give you a new life." Chapter 45. I won't regret it, nor will I let you. Apollo's unexpectedly generous offer left Daphne speechless. After a long pause, she stammered, "But Eros won't let this go. He hasn't finished his revenge on you, and he definitely won't forgive my betrayal." The thought of the love god's cold smile sent a shiver through her. "One more arrow and he could kill my feelings for you or make you fall madly for someone else." "His arrows can't touch me," Apollo said, leaning to kiss her stiff cheek once, then twice, thrice, a string of soft pecks to ease her tension, stopping just shy of her lips. "When you and I are bound by an unbreakable thread of fate, I'll sense anything threatening it, including Eros's lead arrows, an unbreakable thread of fate." He paused oddly before answering, "Like a wedding witnessed by the gods." Daphne's mind reeled from confession to wedding. In a heartbeat, Greek mythology moved at a dizzying pace. She blinked hard, repeating faintly, "A wedding." Apollo frowned, his face darkening as if struck by a thought. "You don't want to." A danger alarm blared in her head, and she focused quickly. "I'm just a nymph, and you're Zeus's son, and we haven't known each other long." His gaze sharpened with each word. She faltered. Then she recalled that, in her later world impressions, most Olympians didn't marry, only taking lover after lover. "I mean, you have an eternal life, you don't need to decide so fast," she said, choosing her words, eyes darting. "I haven't thought about this, and I don't want you to regret it." Apollo's face tightened, displeased, gripping her wrist with an inexplicable urgency, as if fearing she'd retract her words and vanish. "I won't regret it, nor will I let you." Her surprise reflected in his eyes. He shut them briefly, loosening his hold. "I'm being rash. We can wait." Daphne exhaled quietly. That exchange had spiraled far beyond her expectations. She'd only meant to test Apollo's willingness to shield her, following Eros's hint, probing how far he'd go. When he urged her to weave a believable story, she realized for the first time how deeply he felt for her, far beyond what she'd imagined. For a moment she was lost. Neither as Cassandra nor Daphne had anyone ever offered their hearts so unreservedly, defying reason. She was baffled that Apollo would bend his principles so far for her when all she'd done was deceive him. Even if she'd felt fleeting moments of genuine affection, those soft sparks weren't enough to sway her resolve to leave this world. That wouldn't change, shouldn't change. In other words, until Daphne's end, she'd keep deceiving him. For a brief moment she loathed herself, But cold calculation and a gambler's madness snapped back. She saw it instantly now as the perfect time to confess. People lower their guard with those who bear their weaknesses. Likewise, those who think they hold another's fate often miss the new trap they've stepped into. So, Daphne launched a self-destructive offensive. She held back only 2 secrets: that she'd proposed Eros shoot her with the golden arrow, and that before Daphne, she was, and always had been, Cassandra. It was a massive gamble. Apollo could easily turn furious, and one wrong move would cost everything. But she'd always had a daring streak. Besides, she wanted to know how far he'd yield for her. And Apollo kept surprising her. As if making up for his earlier lapse during her silence, he braced one hand on the table, kissing her hair, then her forehead, brow, nose, cheeks, temples, chin, lips, tirelessly tracing every contour, every inch of skin, gentle yet tinged with a possessive edge. Focusing on negotiations under this onslaught was nearly impossible. "What do you mean by a new life?" Daphne asked, ignoring the breath grazing her throat, steering back to the point. Apollo answered earnestly, "I'll ask Father for ambrosia. Hebe's brew can elevate mortals to immortality, ensuring you have eternal life like mine." She trembled slightly. Maybe it was that pesky butterfly from earlier, finally fluttering into her collar's folds. But she knew it was more. Unlike Eros's promise of returning to her original world reborn, Apollo offered eternal life in this one. "Your service to Dionysus merits this reward, and with my request, Father has no reason to refuse. It may wait until Dionysus ascends to Olympus, but that won't take long. If you fear Eros's revenge, we'll hide it from him. You'll seem to follow his orders. Once he can't interfere, there's nothing to worry about." Apollo pulled back, giving her space to think, but his craving for closeness soon won out. He leaned in again, restraining himself awkwardly from interrupting her thoughts. Finally, he compromised, lifting a lock of her hair to his lips for another kiss. "So what do you think?" He awaited her answer, eyes locked on her face, his unconscious lip-licking betraying rare nerves. Daphne had no reason to refuse. Yet, somehow, the simple answer stuck in her throat. Perhaps the golden arrow still swayed her, blocking actions that might hurt him, or his envisioned future was too perfect, too complete. "Am I really worth it?" she asked. Apollo didn't grasp her question, but answered anyway, "Of course." His dilated pupils darkened his eyes, making the gleam in them more striking. Seeing her silence, he placed a hand on her shoulder, sliding along the fabric's edge, almost touching skin but never quite. Is it okay he wasn't just asking about betraying Eros for him? His voice, gaze, expression, touch all coaxed, pleaded for that magical word. Her last hesitation fell away, like the silver pin securing her fabric, rolling from the table to the floor. Okay, the god's domain opened to Daphne, carving a dry, warm island in the deep sea. She breathed as on land for the first time in ages, inhaling the distant, fragrant scent of an immortal. Her fingers clung to the stone table's edge at first, then slipped. The god's halo was the dim room's only light. Glancing past Apollo's shoulder, she saw wave-patterned carvings on the ceiling, swaying in her shaky vision like tides rising and receding, endless. Amid relentless waves and double vision from exhaustion, she vaguely thought Apollo wasn't entirely free of anger over her deception. Some loves, like a summer fever, burn out when the season ends. She and Apollo might be like that. Before the curtain falls, she'd be as good to him as she could. Daphne saw Dionysus again 2 days later, his strength restored, eager to leave the sea for land. Apollo came to see him off but was cooler, more formal with his half-brother than usual, exchanging brief pleasantries before falling silent. "I'd like a word with Daphne alone," Dionysus said calmly. Apollo stared for a moment, then flashed to the plaza's far side. Dionysus ignored Apollo's attitude. As for where Daphne had been those 2 days, he only glanced at her, tactfully not asking, and said, "Satisfied with that wine?" Daphne thought before answering. "I was lively for a bit before passing out." Dionysus shrugged, casually offering, "If you want, I can make you stronger, sleepier wine later." Like knock out a god in one sip strong. The dark-haired god nodded thoughtfully. "Possible." Daphne wasn't sure if he was seriously planning a one-shot divine brew. I was kidding. Dionysus's lips curved, a mischievous glint in his deep purple eyes. I know. He shifted to business. I'm heading to Thrace first. You probably won't like the scene, so I won't invite you. Then straight to Olympus. Be careful. Don't drink from strangers anymore. Semele's son faltered, rubbing his nose. You've seen too many of my embarrassing moments. It's hard to brag. I'll be fine. Daphne laughed too. A sudden, meaningful silence fell. A faint sadness hit her. Maybe it was one-sided, but Semele's son was the first in this world to treat her as a friend. She didn't know if she'd see the fully divine Dionysus descend or meet him again. To avoid Apollo's suspicion, she couldn't show too much emotion. In the end, she said earnestly, may you gain all you deserve. Her solemn tone seemed to reveal something. Dionysus squinted, surprised, then said after a pause, you too. No more farewells. Dionysus stepped upward through the currents, leaving Thetis's city. Daphne waited, but Apollo didn't approach, just watched her from afar. She strolled over slowly. As she neared, Apollo looked away, his restlessness obvious. What? You'll get mad every time I talk to Dionysus, she teased, stepping in front of him with a grin. He denied it stiffly. I'm not mad, she pouted, about to tease more when Apollo turned back, his expression hard to read. I just noticed you show him expressions I've never seen. Chapter 46. She clearly loves him too. Apollo once thought that claiming Daphne would quench the searing restlessness that threatened to burn through his veins. So, he pursued her ardently, seeking her consent when her love for him was undeniable, and took her as his own. He should have been at peace. It was he who untied the sash around her waist, guiding the wild, water and woodland girl to shed her untamed innocence and become a god's lover. She was his now, and only his, but he was spectacularly wrong. At the moment that should have been his most fulfilled, most joyful, a hateful prophetic vision struck again, freezing him in place. Apollo, Daphne called, her voice tinged with confusion. He blinked, seeing her glistening eyes and rose-petal cheeks, but also a vast, despairing landscape where he raced after a figure he could never reach. The vision, as Ananka had partially revealed, showed only a fleeting glimpse of a raised hem, silver embroidery glinting with each step. Now, he not only knew this plain robe was Gaia's gift, but also the feel of its soft, metal-threaded fabric under his fingertips. Worse, he glimpsed the ankle beneath the hem, fleeting but clear enough for a god's eyes to capture. Slowly, he shifted his gaze. The delicate bone in the vision matched the one in his palm perfectly. The future hadn't changed. She would still abandon him. The anger he'd half quelled flared anew, burning hotter than before. His fingers tightened, as if to grasp what the prophecy made untouchable, pressing down. Daphne, unaware of the torrent's source, froze, too startled to react. Malice and tenderness tore at Apollo. He knew he shouldn't blame her. She couldn't see his visions, didn't know what her future self would do, and bore no guilt for what hadn't happened. Yet reason failed. He knew his thoughts were childish, laughable, but one refrain looped endlessly. She clearly loves him too. She clearly loves him, so why would she leave? In that moment, Apollo realized for the first time that possessing her wasn't the end of his torment, but the beginning. Keeping her love might not be as easy as he'd thought. Love's new lessons didn't stop there. Watching Daphne bid farewell to Dionysus from afar, Apollo made another discovery: he barely knew her. Her expressions with Semele's son, playful smiles, thoughtful little gestures as she listened were all foreign to him. I just noticed you show him expressions I've never seen. With Dionysus, Daphne was relaxed, speaking freely, joking, trusting him deeply. With Apollo, she always paused to gauge him before touching or speaking. The difference irked him, though it was explainable she might fear his displeasure, always holding a trace of awe or a bond with Dionysus, forged through shared trials, bred uncommon trust. But it wasn't just expressions. What truly stung Apollo, like a needle, was the easy intimacy flowing between them. Dionysus said little, yet she seemed to grasp his meaning instantly, as if they shared some unspoken understanding. What it was, Apollo couldn't know. Daphne had bared her deepest secrets to him. He should be the closest to her in every way. Yet here he was, an outsider to their moment, the subtle powerlessness both alien and maddening. Thinking deeper, he realized there was still so much about her he didn't know. So, abruptly, he asked, "What do you like?" Daphne fell silent, surprised, giving him that searching look, then smiled. Asking so suddenly, planning to get me a gift. Apollo's eyes flickered, not denying it. "Knowing what I'm getting would ruin the surprise," she said, looping her arm through his, eyes sparkling. I can't wait. Now he had to find her the perfect gift. Cest. The day after Dionysus left, Thetis invited Daphne to chat. Upon meeting, Thetis studied her, then teased with a relieved smile. Love really does nourish body and soul, adding glow to a lover's face. "You look much better than when you arrived." Daphne fought the urge to touch her face, unsure how to respond. She couldn't exactly say that whenever exhaustion and exhilaration pushed her to the brink. The god of healing and medicine generously bathed her in holy light to banish fatigue. "So," she pivoted, "you summoned me for something." "No need for such formality," Thetis said, gesturing to sit on the same couch. "By the way, several nymphs told me Apollo cornered them with odd questions. He meant no harm, but I thought you should know." Daphne rolled her eyes, unfazed. "Got it." Thetis dropped it. "I actually invited you to hear more about the land." So, Daphne spent the afternoon regaling the sea god's daughter with tales of the surface. Thetis, bound by her role to maintain dignity among sea. Chapter 47. His hand was trembling. The next day, Apollo went alone to the sea god's palace. Relieved of dealing with Poseidon, Thetis was in high spirits, pulling Daphne from the palace to a sealed-off area nearby to watch the fish migration at the turn of summer and autumn. During this season, nymphs and mermaids steered clear, leaving the waters to thousands of fish moving as one, as if under a silent command. They sliced through the sapphire waves, forming spiraling ranks that swirled upward, resembling a shimmering underwater whirlwind from afar. Up close, the sea creatures sensed the divine presence, slowing to circle Thetis and Daphne affectionately. Bolder fish darted out, nibbling at their hair or hands before flicking their tails and swimming off. The spectacle stole Daphne's breath, and she gazed at the fish in silent awe. In her original world, watching a fish migration in the high-pressure deep sea without diving gear was impossible. In moments like these, she had to admit that, despite the cruel, irrational nature of this god-ruled era, it held a unique romance and allure. True, the gods wielded powers far beyond technology's reach, while humans lay helpless in a primitive cradle. The harsh hierarchy dictated by strength alone clashed with her lingering modern sensibilities. But what truly unsettled her was it humanity's weakness, or the way the powerful arbitrarily shaped the world for all. If the latter, the order of existence, seemed oddly universal, modern civilization was the fruit of millennia of swelling human will. With gods absent, humans dreamed of godhood reaching the moon and stars, pushing past lifespan's limits, creating life from nothing. More cynically, perhaps the biggest difference between modernity and this divine age was that modern plundering, oppression, and slaughter wore a veil of moral decency, while a god needed only being offended to raise a city. Besides, every god was different. Daphne glanced at Thetis, who returned a warm smile. "What do you think?" "I can't find words to praise this sight." Thetis's gaze softened on the fish. "Mother says I was born amid a migration, so these little ones always calm me. To a land guest, this might be a marvel, but to me, it's as natural as seaweed or coral." She tilted her head toward the faint light filtering through the sea, her smile tinged with wistful clarity. "The land must have things I can't imagine but you see as ordinary. No matter how much you tell me, imagination is just that." Daphne couldn't help saying, "Why not see it for yourself?" Seeing Thetis shake her head, she added, "I haven't forgotten you said Phoebe prophesied." "Yes, that land would bring me endless sorrow and grief. Then, without stepping on land, why not see the world above from coastal reefs or upstream rivers?" Thetis stared, stunned, clearly never considering bending the prophecy's rules like that. Daphne instantly regretted it. She shouldn't have suggested it. Unlike her, who survived by playing word games, Thetis held Phoebe's oracles as sacred. Her idea must have offended her. But Thetis's reaction surprised her. Why didn't I think of that? Her excitement grew, blue-green eyes sparkling. No nymphs are around. Let's go to the surface. Daphne faltered. I was just saying. It's a great idea, Thetis said, hooking her arm and swimming upward, winking. Don't worry if we're caught. I won't say it was your idea. Quarreled. Once Thetis decided, she was relentless. Daphne gritted her teeth she'd spoken rashly, so she'd go along. Despite bold words, Thetis didn't venture upriver to inland. They surfaced in a reef-strewn bay. The late summer day was long, and as they broke the surface, the sun's rays hit their wet skin, its heat sinking in after a moment. Beyond the gently rolling blue waves lay a rugged, beautiful coastline. The complex coastal terrain deterred human ships, and the nearest fishing village was too distant to see. This is the land, Thetis murmured, tracing the rocky beach, the hills, and the sun-wilted wild olive trees with her gaze. Daphne hadn't realized Thetis had never even seen the coast, showing how seriously her parents, Nereus and Doris, took Phoebe's prophecy. Want to get closer? There's a spot to stand. Daphne pointed to a large reef in shallow water. Thetis hesitated briefly, then declared, yes. Daphne swam ahead, turning to wait. At the reef's edge, Thetis bit her lip, her hand slowing. Daphne did nothing, just waited for the sea goddess to take the step or retreat. Then, Thetis lifted her chin, her face firm, grabbed the reef's edge and hauled herself from the lapping waves. The uneven reef made her stumble, but she stood straight, panting, scanning around as if expecting the prophecy's doom to strike, her face pale as seawater dripped, but nothing happened. Overjoyed, Thetis grabbed Daphne's hand, shaking it childishly, or look. Daphne, unsure what to look at, caught Thetis's joy and grinned foolishly. After the excitement, they sat on the reef, chatting idly, like schoolmates breaking rules together. The small bursts, bold adventure bonded them. When Daphne slipped and used you instead of your grace, Thetis waved it off, banning formalities thereafter. They lingered all afternoon. As Helios drove his sun chariot toward the horizon, the bay glowed gold and red. Thetis fell into a melancholic silence, then said, You'll leave with Apollo soon, won't you? Daphne stirred the water with her hand, replying softly, Probably. It's always like this. Nymphs around me leave when they find lovers. They return only if their lover is mortal and dies, going to Hades' realm. Thetis paused, or if their lover abandons them. Daphne stayed quiet, but leaving isn't betrayal. Many nymphs and goddesses loved by gods thrive. I don't mean to upset you, just... Thetis ruffled her hair, frustrated. Daphne rested her cheek on her knee, saying softly, Gods are eternal, but their love isn't. Thetis froze and then propped her forehead, smiling bitterly. You knew. Have you had a lover? Daphne asked. Thetis answered crisply. Poseidon once hinted at interest. I ignored him, flirting with a merman in front of him. He was furious and never brought it up again. Daphne choked. Thetis's grudge against Poseidon ran deep. I don't think chastity guards my power or authority, but I'll never be anyone's wife, Thetis said, squinting at the cooling purple-blue sky, her voice heavy with unspoken regret. Before marrying my father, Mother was a goddess of her own waters. Now, few remember that. The mood grew heavy. Thetis coughed lightly. Enough of that. Being loved by Leto's son, are you happy? Daphne closed her eyes. She couldn't lie and say no. With him, she always felt needed, desired. Then she recalled Apollo's promise after their first intimacy, a grand wedding, so serious it nearly came with a Styx oath. Once, he'd almost sworn it, but she deftly changed the subject. She'd be lying if she said she was never swayed, especially under those blue eyes' deep gaze, when she forgot everything but Apollo. From a pragmatic view, even if Eros sent her back to her world reborn, no amount of luck or effort could match the endless wealth and glory of a god's partner. But Thetis was right, even if Apollo loved her senselessly now. What about later? While he adored her, she could overlook the rules that chafed her. But when he loved another goddess, nymph, or mortal, she'd face this world alone, with undying eternity. The thought made her shudder. I'm happy now, she said finally, eager to end it. Oh, look, Dolphins! Silver-white dolphins leaped under the rising moon, circling closer. The largest one nudged Daphne's legs in the water with its rounded snout. Playful and affectionate, Daphne laughed, stroking its smooth body, turning to Thetis. I heard sea nymphs ride dolphins across the waves. I've always wanted to try. Thetis's expression turned odd. She glanced at the dolphin, squeezed Daphne's hand. I should go. You're welcome back any time. Why the sudden goodbye? Daphne was puzzled. But Thetis waved, smiling, and slipped into the dark blue tide, her fiery copper hair flickering before vanishing. Turning, the dolphin was gone. Apollo. The golden-haired god stood beside her, unnoticed until now. He swept back his wet bangs, revealing bright, smiling blue eyes. I came back from Poseidon's and saw you two. He leaned to kiss her. No, wait, the dolphin was... Apollo said candidly. It's easier to move as a dolphin in the sea. Daphne understood Thetis's reaction now. If you want to ride a dolphin, I can... She covered his mouth. I didn't know you could turn into other animals besides ravens. I didn't mean anything by it. Apollo raised a brow. I didn't think it meant anything else until you said that. Restiti we mahia de grol. His words sparked thoughts, his gaze deepening into molten gemstone intensity. She'd grown attuned to his subtle expressions, her breath catching instinctively. Satisfied, Apollo grew serious. Dionysus is heading to Olympus soon. I sense my second prophecy coming. I must return to Delphi. He took her hand, fingers lacing tightly. Come with me. Apollo heard music from Olympus. A sharp pain flared in his eyes, then vanished, replaced by an indescribable shift. Without using his power, Apollo knew his grasp on prophecy had strengthened. His first prophecy had fully come true. Another new god had arrived, born mortal, bathed in divine blood Dionysus, now recognized by Zeus. His spirit stirred. Apollo sat upright on the tripod in the temple's depths, focusing to peer into the sea of consciousness toward Ananke's rift. Unbidden, Daphne crossed his mind, but his focus didn't waver. It steadied, a calm born of control. Just 2 more prophecies, no. Maybe one would give him the confidence to ask Father, the king of gods, for ambrosia for his bride. Soaked in this steady, hopeful calm, Apollo gazed into the void. His pupils dilated, the immortal gold shrinking to a glowing thread. Fragmented words, decoded from obscure patterns, flowed naturally from his lips. The queen of sea nymphs cradles a child, whose dual-fated glory outshines the father. Before he could ponder the second prophecy's meaning, his pupils widened again. For reasons unknown, he couldn't stop reading Ananke's patterns, seeing and speaking the next fragment of fate. The urge to voice a third prophecy surged before the second could manifest. Apollo bit his lip, swallowing the words. Blood tinged his tongue, his throat burning, his eyes throbbing as if they'd burst. Ananke was warning him for refusing to speak. He shut his eyes, fingers clenching, body rigid as stone. After an eternity-like moment, the physical strain faded. He wiped blood from his lips, head dropping, drained. His hand was trembling. How could it not? A manic smile twisted his lips. The third prophecy, buried in silence, was stark and simple. The silver-bowed prophet will lose his love forever. Chapter 48, strumming solely for her. A radiant beam flooded the room. Daphne shielded her eyes, sliding off the couch's edge as the light softened, her bare feet padding to the window. A golden pillar rose from the nearby temple's center, outshining the sun for a moment before dissolving into glowing snowflakes that drifted down. She reached out to catch the falling light, then crashed. The temple door slammed open with a thunderous bang. Startled, she turned, vision blurring as a force pushed her back. When her senses cleared, golden hair flashed past, and a rock-like weight pressed against her. Apollo! She pushed lightly, but he didn't budge. What's wrong? She asked. He didn't answer, burying his face in her neck, unmoving. Only after a moment did she realize he was pressed against her pulse, feeling the throb of her blood with his cheek. The light rain outside hadn't faded. He must have rushed to her right after giving his prophecy. She was right here in his temple. There was no need for such urgency. Even back in Delphi, Apollo's restlessness only grew. Daphne had wanted to stay in the hillside hut, but he insisted she remain in the temple specifically, the central hall he'd once forbidden her from entering. During his prophecy today, everyone had to clear out, leaving her to wait in this side chamber. She wondered if she'd slipped up, if he'd caught some hint of her secrets, but it didn't seem so. Lately, Apollo acted like a dragon guarding treasure under its claws to sleep soundly. A near tender feeling stirred. Her fingers wove into his soft golden hair, stroking gently. Apollo calmed under the soothing motion, finally lifting his head. His gaze was so soft it could make anyone forgive his impulsive whims. "What happened?" she asked, noticing a cut on his lip, but in a blink it vanished, as if imagined. Apollo's nose brushed hers, nuzzling affectionately. Nothing. Just suddenly tired. Do gods get tired from experience? She doubted it. I haven't mastered prophecy's power. Peering into fate takes a toll. But I feel better now. He inhaled deeply, propping himself up. I must go to Olympus. Dionysus has ascended to godhood, and there's a celebratory feast I can't miss. Daphne smiled, and send him my regards. He took a step, then turned back. Tell me you won't leave while I'm gone. Her heart skipped, but she kept her tone light. Why would I? I don't know, he said, eyes dropping briefly, then flickering with vulnerability. I should be able to give you everything, but it never feels like enough. Daphne ducked her head, as if shy, stepping close to kiss his cheek. I'll wait for you. One kiss wasn't enough, and it took a long, lingering moment before Apollo reluctantly let her go. Just before parting, she blinked rapidly, choosing her words. If Eros shows up while you're gone, what should I do? You said to act like I'm still under his orders. I shouldn't avoid him too obviously. At the love god's name, Apollo's eyes sharpened like an eagle's. He stared, unblinking, clearly weighing the risk of letting her near Eros. Daphne held her composure, meeting his gaze calmly. Finally, he said curtly, if he appears, you may speak with him. Once. Accept no gifts or blessings. But Eros didn't come. Daphne wandered Delphi's forests, finding no talking rabbits, let alone the love god himself. From past encounters, Eros seemed to track her progress, meaning he saw no need to meet now. So, she gave up, returning to the temple to wait for Apollo if this was a test. She couldn't afford to raise his suspicions. She could break her promise and leave now, but the time wasn't right. Gods' feasts lasted ages. Hermes's had gone 3 days and nights. Though Apollo might be gone for days, she kept up appearances. Besides, Apollo wasn't the only one with attachment issues after days of constant closeness. Being apart felt strange. Waiting was all she could focus on. Waiting, she fell asleep in the temple's depths. At midnight, a familiar presence stirred her. She leaned toward it instinctively. Someone gently stroked her hair and cheek, half dreaming. She opened her eyes to glowing moonlight and Apollo, undimmed by its radiance. Daphne glanced out the window. The full moon hung high. Selene's chariot hadn't begun its descent. She hadn't slept long. You're back so soon. My heart wasn't in the feast. Dionysus found me a cup of wine and shooed me out. As if fearing she'd miss his meaning, he added, I didn't want you waiting too long. Next time there's a divine banquet, you'll be at my side. He leaned to kiss her. She shrank back, laughing. Wait, how's Dionysus? He paused, displeased, before answering. Great, of course. He's now recognized as the god of revelry and madness, protector of juicy fruits, theatre, and wine. I never asked what revenge did he take on Lycurgus. Apollo hesitated. Daphne closed her eyes. Tell me. He drove the Thracian king mad, making him mistake his son for a vine and chop him down, then kill his wife. When he came to, it was too late. Thrace's land was cursed, no fruit has grown since. His people, guided by dreams, learned that as long as Lycurgus lived, no fruit would grow. So they tied him to Mount Pangaeum and tore him apart with horses. Daphne was silent before saying, I think he had to do it. Apollo frowned. That king nearly got you killed. You shouldn't pity him. Not pity I want him punished too, but she didn't finish. The absurdly brutal method, showcasing divine might, only deepened the ache in her chest. Did the other gods react to your first prophecy? She seized the first new topic in her mind. Apollo's eyes flickered. They had no reason to stop it from coming true. If it avoided conflicts like Semele's tragedy, all the better. Daphne exhaled, then asked casually, "What else happened at the feast?" Apollo painted a vivid picture, Zeus toasting Dionysus. Hera's vivid expression, unlike with Apollo. Zeus and Hera had reached a tentative truce over Semele and the Thracian king. Hera accepted Dionysus's place on Olympus, and Zeus let her interference slide. Apollo hid almost nothing, laying bare the tangled web of Olympian relations. His openness made her heart race, knowing such secrets left two paths vanish or join them. Finally, almost offhandedly, he said, "Before I left, I played a tune to liven things up. What kind?" He raised a hand, a lyre appearing between his fingers. His voice softened. "Want to hear?" Daphne didn't think twice. "If you're willing." Of course. He plucked the strings, round, full notes spilling from his fingertips. It was the first time Apollo played a full piece for her, and Daphne's first reaction was regret. She'd nearly forgotten he was the god of music, unprepared for how breathtaking, how devastating a melody from the master of music could be. The melody wasn't complex, but under his peerless skill, it wove layered, shifting waves, mist flickering between light and shadow, rugged peaks rising sharply. It stirred a nostalgia-like ache, as if she'd heard it long ago, etched in her heart. Her ears weren't the only listeners, her eyes, watching his strumming fingers, and her skin, feeling the air's vibrations, joined in. If the piece was a beautiful storm, whipping up fierce winds and waves, the golden-haired god stood calm at its eye. His lowered lashes cast a faint golden shadow over his blue eyes, his flawless face almost cold. Each movement of his fingers and pick was precise, deliberate, commanding everything within the note's reach as long as the music played. When the final phrase's echo faded into the silent night, Daphne felt dazed. She doubted she could ever enjoy music again after such overwhelming perfection. Apollo raised his eyes, his expression softening into a smile. Daphne opened her mouth, voiceless. "There's another piece I just thought of." Without asking, he began playing. If the first piece ruthlessly stole the listener's heart, proving Apollo's worth as music's god, this one was simpler, purer. To make her realize she was its sole audience, he was strumming solely for her. Soft, harmonious notes wove a dense net, enveloping her from her ears, ensnaring her, hotter than flame, yet gentler than tides. The music grazed her eardrums, pierced her mind, conveying emotions that words would distort. Her heart became an auditory organ, trembling uncontrollably with the melody. The fire sparked, burning from chest to fingertips, spreading deep, consuming, melting into a flowing spring. Worst, Apollo spared no glance for the strings, his eyes fixed on her, seeing only her. She didn't notice when the piece ended. Apollo, lyre in hand, steadied her, waiting for her to find words. "That one. Does it have a name?" Her voice was low, hoarse. He blinked, saying softly, "Daphne." Daphne woke to the sound of tides. She listened with closed eyes, slowly sensing something off. Though Delphi was near sea cliffs, the waves weren't this clear. Sitting up, she frowned at a surge of fatigue. The surroundings grabbed her attention, an unfamiliar, vast palace, serene and empty, with the ceaseless sound of waves on rocks. She shuffled to the nearest window, finding the palace perched on a towering outcrop, overlooking a pristine white beach and an endless sea beyond. An island, fragmented memories stirred at the word. After playing two sublime pieces, Apollo kept strumming elsewhere, obsessively chasing the perfect tone, increasing the challenge. His enchanting melodies lingered in her mind, drowning all thought like a flood, until he found the sound he sought. In a lucid moment as her consciousness surfaced, she'd agreed to something. "Welcome to Delos?" "Come with me to Delos." His voice and memories echo rang together, making her flinch. Apollo kissed her forehead, subtly letting her lean on him. "If you're tired, rest more." Daphne turned silently, gazing again at the vast sea meeting the horizon. Her mind was numb, her thoughts oddly flat. She couldn't leave this place on foot.